Good evening to everyone. A warm welcome, Mish, to County Hall this evening, to fellow councillors, guests, officers, members of the public. Welcome to tonight's Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Children's Services Education Skills, Thursday the 17th of October. Just to run through some procedural issues for you first. In case of an emergency, there are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the stairs to your left as you leave the public gallery or the council chamber. Exit via the door at the back of the building, cross the inner car park to the evacuation point, pavement outside the fire station across the road. The lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not enter the building until you've advised it is safe to do so by a member of staff. Okay. So we start off this evening with apologies and any change of membership. I'm aware of apologies from Councillor Medland, which was replaced by Councillor Spink, who actually isn't here yet. So Councillor Spink is apparently filling in for Councillor Medland this evening. Councillor Stephen Hendry and Councillor Blake is substituting for him. Emily's online. We've not heard from Matthew, and we've not heard from Richard Quigley either. So I hope Councillor Spink will join us some stage during the process. Next item is the minutes. The minutes of the meeting on the 17th of October, which was our special meeting. Our special meeting to review the school place planning document. Do you have any questions regarding the minutes of that meeting? I have a proposer, please, for those minutes. Proposed by Councillor Downer. A seconder, please, Councillor Churchman. All those in favour of those minutes being a true and accurate record? Passed. Okay, next item on the agenda, item number 3, declarations of interest. Does any council have any declaration of interest not already declared to declare on this stage anything on the agenda? No, thank you. Okay, item 4 is public questions. We have a 15-minute session. Members of the public may ask questions orally or without prior notice, but written guarantee it will only be given questions sent by the certain time frame. We have had one written question. We will have one interest in a verbal question, but the written question is from Duncan Morrison. Is Duncan here? Duncan, do you want me to read it out for yourself? Do you want to read your question out yourself? What do you want to do? Please do. Just push the right-hand button and the microphone will come on.
I'm Duncan Morrison. I'm a branch and district secretary of the Isle of Wight NEU, the National Education Union. My question is, in the place planning consultation and now the report that's gone forward, what has been put in place to protect jobs and the skills of those people working in those schools which are threatened with closure?
Firstly, thank you very much for your question. It was a very appropriate question. In fact, it was one that was shared. I shared the answer to this with councillors yesterday at the councillors briefing because it is a really, really important question. So thank you. I will read the response. You have the right to supplementary question off that if you so wish. So the response is, the council values and wants to retain skilled and knowledgeable school staff, appreciates the significant impact the current proposals are having on staff support and on staff. Support is being given to staff in terms of their well-being, assist their resilience at this time. Staff who are given notice of redundancy will be put on the council's redeployment register, will be given the first opportunity with any job vacancies under the council's policy if they meet the essential criteria role. providing the assistance of a careers advisor for staff drop-in sessions, can help with CVs, job search, applications, etc. So one-to-one appointments, careers advice. This will support staff seeking a suitable alternative appointment. Staff will also be encouraged to apply for council roles within the new school improvement service, expansion of the SCN vision, and across wider opportunities within Children's Services Directorate, notified of careers fairs. That's the written answer. I guess you will have a supplementary question to that we'll try and answer as well. Thank you.
So, some councillors will be aware that the school-based trade union is pushing for voluntary redundancy trawl across the Isle of Wight schools, and indeed for the redeployment list, which we do welcome, opened early. The opening date of the end of May, the very end of May for teachers, to June is not sufficient given the school year for people to find other roles with schools. And although whilst I recognise the issue, the possibility of being employed elsewhere in the council, the reality is most of those, my members and the other base union members, will be looking for roles in schools. So the question is, do you think what you have put in place is adequate? Because I feel very strongly, my members feel very strongly, that it is nowhere near adequate.
Thank you for your question again, much appreciated. I'll ask Director of Children's Services to answer that question, unless Councillor Bacon wants to answer whichever. Both of you.
In stereo.
Councillor Bacon.
Obviously, the question was written a few days ago. There has been a subsequent movement or development, whatever the right word is. There was a meeting last night with representatives of unions, during which further representations and requests were made. As a result of that, there have been discussions today, and I believe a letter is on its way. I'm not sure final drafts, not quite, but a letter is on its way to Mr. Morrison and colleague unions. Hopefully take.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Thank you, Mr. Morrison, for your questions. It is a very important issue. Scrutiny panel, we made this aware at our meeting last month. So you will get your letter. Do you have the right to reply to the letter? Get it. I'm aware of one potential of a verbal question. That's from Mrs. Jen Morris. Jen, would you like to ask your question? Oh, Jen Hughes, sorry.
Thanks.
Apologies.
No problem. Hi, Mrs. Jen Hughes, parent representative of Oakfield Primary. My question is regarding transparency. Now, the Place Planning Committee have talked a lot about transparency, but the parent body feels that that has not met at all. And I'd like to just draw this meeting's attention to the second dictionary definition of transparency: the quality of being open to public scrutiny. Now, the report that has been released yesterday, we really don't believe has taken any note of anything that the had to say in regards to the decision pressed forward to recommend the closure of Oakfield Primary School. And my question is, regarding the validity of this process, it really feels like it's been rushed, and I'm not quite sure how anybody expects people to be able to make a really informed decision, given the reports released yesterday in the timescale that is currently present. So I would like to ask if the Place Planning believe that they have allowed enough time and that they have worked in line with the legal requirements of implementing such a strategy imposing concern that we would grounds for judicial review, which waste everybody's health is waste of time for everyone, including everybody's resolution Place Plan.
Thank you for your question, and I humbly apologise for the mix-up of names. That's certainly my fault. Place planning committee, I think you must refer to the decision makers, I guess, rather than, we don't have a place planning committee. as such.
Sorry, I mean Ashley Whitaker, Naomi Carter,
the-
Jay Kennett et
The
al.
education leads. who we
Yes,
have.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I guess my answer is that we do believe that there's been enough time to consider the findings of the consultation. When the consultation started on the 20th of September, and of course, it's possible to start considering those, compiling those responses as we go along. In addition, what's happened is that because the decision-making body is Cabinet, Cabinet were provided with as many of the materials as possible, including a full set of consultation submissions broken down by children and young people and by adults more than a week before publication of the papers yesterday, to make sure that they had additional time to make sure that they had enough opportunity to read, reflect and discuss. And in fact, we had a meeting with Cabinet specifically to discuss consultation submissions on Monday afternoon. The second part of your question about do we believe that it's legal? Yes, we do. We're following the process as it is laid out, and we believe that we are acting in accordance with that.
You wish to have a supplementary question to that?
Thank you. So my supplementary question stays on the transparency theme. So in the interest of being transparent, I would like to bring the safety valve agreement up. And from what I can ascertain, given the meetings that I have been watching, going back to the start of 2023, the Isle of Wight Council has been granted a certain amount of money to deal with the deficit on the special educational need spending, but that the stipulation in receiving and continuing to receive that money is that the Isle of Wight Council needs to balance the mainstream school budgets by 2027. So my question on that is, have you failed to be transparent in the actual reason why we're doing this? Is it really about improving educational outcomes for all children, or is this just basically to save your backsides and get your debt paid off?
Thank you for that question. Pass over to Mr. Whitaker.
So the reason that we are addressing the school place planning challenges and the very significant surplus of places in the primary school sector is because the birth rate on the Isle of Wight has been decreasing for many years and indeed has decreased by getting on for a third in about the last 8 years, something of that order. And it's very clear in the papers that we have such a large surplus of places that head teachers and chairs of governors have been writing to the council for many years, saying that the council must take decisive action to address this, because the financial challenges they have in mainstream schools are such that they're unable to offer a broad and balanced curriculum. And in running a school where roles are falling very significantly, it's very hard for them to make decisions around planning, strategic planning, recruitment decisions, etc. That is the reason that we are taking action around school place planning, because the education outcomes on the island benchmark very poorly. We're at a very low level compared with national peers, and that is the reason that we need to take action relating to school place planning. The issue of special educational needs and the safety valve agreement is separate, although there are things which link the importance of improving standards in mainstream schools to also addressing the challenges we have in special educational needs. In terms of the safety valve agreement itself, we and being transparent, earlier this year, we started publishing all the papers relating to the safety valve agreement, including the minutes of the safety valve board meetings that take place on a regular basis to drive the transformation of the special educational needs system. And we did that specifically to be transparent about what is going on. If those people who have looked at those papers that are published on the council's website will see that the council is not meeting the criteria in the safety valve agreement. We are issuing considerably higher numbers of education and healthcare plans than is stipulated in the agreement on basis the forecasts which were shared with the DfE at the time of the agreement being reached. And the reason we're doing that is because the council has a statutory duty to assess the need for an education and healthcare plan, and we continue to do that. We continue to spend very significantly more amounts of money from the high needs block of the dedicated schools grant than is stated we should be spending in the safety valve agreement. And we do that because we are committed to meeting our statutory duties and meeting the needs of children on the Isle of Wight. And the Department for Education understand what we are doing, and they continue to pay us the amounts of money available under the safety valve agreement, in spite of the fact that we continue to spend more than it says in the agreement. Now, the link between school-placed planning and special educational needs is one of the reasons that we have such high levels of special educational need on the island. And if you've read the Local Government Association education report, which was published in October, you'll see a very stark graph in there that shows that the Isle of Wight has more children as a proportion of total child cohort registered as with some kind of special educational need, whether it's at SEN support level at school or with an education and healthcare plan, than any other local authority in the country. I believe that there's a distinct linkage between low education standards in mainstream school and the escalation of need, and therefore the need to have an education and healthcare plan. So to close the loop, what I'd say is that solving the issues around school-placed planning, allowing our school system to be appropriately resourced so that education standards can be improved, will have a knock-on impact for those children who have additional needs. Their needs will be identified earlier, they will receive support earlier, and their needs will escalate less. And if we do that, we will be able to meet need without the need for an education and healthcare plan in more occasions. Of course, we will carry on having some education and healthcare plans. Some children will always need an education and healthcare plan. But there are children on the Isle of Wight who currently have an educational healthcare plan that would not need one if education standards in mainstream schools was higher. That was one of the conclusions which was reached independently by the Local Government Association Send Peer Challenge, which we had in early October, and the report for that is included in the papers for this meeting.
You're proposing to send 107
sorry,
SEND children
sorry.
to worse provisions. How is that better for their
Sorry.
educational outcomes?
Mr. Hughes, I can't allow another question, I'm sorry. So we have 1 minute left, but I will allow the lady in front to ask a question as well, please do. But just introduce yourself and then ask your question, please.
Right, I'm going to speak really quickly because the gentleman took so long talking that he's not left a lot of time for questions. My roles are as teacher at Christ the King College, joint chaplain at Christ the King College, president of the NEU for the Isle of Wight. I am questioning the whole process of selection of schools. I think that 50% of the schools chosen are Church of England schools, and I'm suggesting there's a bias there against the church schools in the selection of the process. Also, I want to question that whole logic of saying that poor educational standards have led to the number of EHCP needs and special educational needs. I think that is flawed logic. I think it's extrapolating from incorrect data.
Thank you very much for your 2 questions. I'll take that as your 2 questions. I think the previous answer needed to be a detailed answer because it was a very, so I will be liberal with the time to allow for questions to be asked. Okay. Mr. Whitaker.
So there are 2 statements. So I'm assuming you're questioning So you'd like me to respond on whether I think that there was bias against Anglican schools in the identification of the 6 schools? Is that the question?
Questions I understand. It
So
was-
I think in the papers, we've articulated the reasons why the schools were identified. So when the schools were identified back in September, when it was proposed that there would be consultation, there were the reasons why those schools had been identified rather than other schools were included in those papers. And in the papers for Cabinet next week, which were published yesterday, there are there's 29 appendices. There's 6 of them relate to one for each school that breaks down, again, the findings of the consultation and the responses to that. The data in there, the information in there does explain the reasons why the school have been identified. I hear what you say, and I've also aware, because we've published the submission received from the diocese about it as well. If we want to look at the data around how many schools are Anglican or Catholic on the island, I think, I haven't got the numbers to hand, but it's something in the order of 47% of primary schools. If those 3 were to close, we'd be reducing, in terms of the percentage of faith schools, down to 37, which is in line with the national average. So I think in terms of that, one of the other points that is made in the Local Government Association education report refers to the statutory duties that councils have. And yes, we have a duty to make a range of appropriate education available. And we believe that under these proposals, that would still be possible, given capacity in other Anglican schools on the island within a reasonable distance of where people live. The second element of the question, you were saying that it was what I was just saying about the link between poor or relatively low education standards and escalation in the need of special educational, escalation in special educational needs. There's a lot of research around that, actually, the link between the quality of education and early identification of need, and if it's not identified, how it can escalate. I'd be happy to, share that or discuss it at another point if we haven't got more time to talk about it now.
Would
Thank
I
you,
be
Mr.
allowed my response to the mic?
No, I allowed you to, that there were 2 questions you asked there.
I'm allowed to respond back though, aren't I?
No, this isn't a debate, this is questions. You asked a question, Mr. Williams answered the question. You can by all means contact Mr. Williams separately, but I've got a process to follow.
Thank
Allowing
you.
extra
Then
time.
I would welcome the discussion to go on that point. Thank you.
Absolutely, that's fine. That was, yes. There are some long detailed answers, some long, very important questions. I'm quite happy if members are happy just to allow another 5 minutes for questions if there are any. I'll see a few nods. I will allow one more set of questions if anyone has any more questions up there, because it's an important topic. We need to discuss this. Yes. Hello, Mark.
Yeah, very quickly, Mark Chip from Unison. Just on the issue of special education, I know that in terms of going to meetings of staff in schools, going to parents' meetings, there's been a tremendous anxiety about the sheer disruption that the closure of schools will bring about. And certainly I know at least 2 and perhaps as many as 4 of the schools have taken a particular pride in the sheer number of pupils that they've educated that have often failed at other schools and have been particularly successful in terms of the nurture that they've been given. Are you not worried about the disruption that is going to be caused for those children and families? And are you also not worried about the vast skill, dedication and commitment that will be lost as a result of the closure of those schools and the almost inevitable redundancy of the majority of staff that are working with those pupils?
Thank you. I think obviously the second part of that question hopefully was answered by the written question regarding, the council's wish to, to protect as much skill set as possible. But I'll ask Ms. Webb to answer the first question you've asked. Then you can have a supplementary, Mark, no problem.
Thank you for the question. Do I worry about the families and children who are going to be going through any process, depending on what's agreed? Yes, I do. And I worry along with my colleagues in the directorate and I know colleagues in schools as well as the children are worried and the parents are worried as well. I think we're all worried about it. And the reason I think we need to proceed with it, because I believe that it's absolutely in the best interest of children to make changes to the education system on the Isle of Wight. In the long term, we have to make these changes to improve things in the long term. So the answer to your question is yes, I do worry. And I'm committed, along with my colleagues and along with my colleagues in the directorate, along with my colleagues in schools, whether they be schools that may or may not close, and colleagues who work in schools that will be receiving children, to make any transition as smooth as possible. We already work with school colleagues when children are transitioning from early years into primary school, and from primary into secondary, and from secondary into post-16. And we will adopt some of the well-used principles that happens in that work to work with all our children and families if they will be transitioning from a school that closes into their new school. In terms of the skills and commitment of the staff in there, I'll just briefly cover that. Just because I want to link it to special educational needs, Mark, because I think you said your questions were around SEN. The numbers of children we have on the island with SEN is very significant and is growing. And we have a lot of children who are not in appropriate placements. A lot of the children who are currently being electively home educated have special educational needs which were not previously being met in mainstream schools, and their families have decided to take them out. And the reform of the education system on the Isle of Wight is about improving education standards and improving outcomes. And I hope that as this process evolves, that the opportunities for colleagues who want to work in the field of special educational needs will still be there. We have more children with education healthcare plans and with SEND. And as this process evolves, it will become clearer where children might be moving to and opportunities to work perhaps in specialist resource provisions in mainstream schools, within the special school sector, will emerge. And I believe that the number of roles is driven by the numbers of children, and that staff will be able to follow children to wherever they receive their education in the future.
Thank you. Mark, I will happily allow you a supplementary, of course.
Very quickly, in terms of the meetings that I've been to, I've been massively impressed by the questions and concerns put by the staff, which haven't actually concentrated so much on issues of their own job preservation, although we've attempted, obviously, as trade unions, to put that forward to management and councillors. They've been massively concerned about the welfare of the children they work with. And is just in terms of this question, I'll put it to you privately, Ashley, and I'll put it at meetings, is there not a real danger that aspects of special educational need could be massively put at risk and that the current proposals be counterproductive just because of that dislocation that is going to be introduced into the system? Special education needs children inevitably take longer to adapt to any change, and also in addition to that, you would be putting at risk the loss of many staff who've got a particular expertise and experience with special needs children. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. I think I've already made the point that the reason that we need to address the state of the education sector on the island is because education standards are, I think we have consensus that they are not good enough. And we have to make these difficult decisions now, and we have to mitigate the additional challenges that these bring in the short term, because they are worth it in the long term, because we believe that we can realign the primary school system, the numbers of primary school places with the numbers of children we have, that will allow the primary school sector to be better equipped to deliver improved curriculum, more highly skilled staff, education standards will rise, and that will benefit all children, including those children who have special educational needs or disabilities. In fact, if you look at the data, it is actually those children who underperform to an even larger extent than all children. And so I would say that by driving up the overall standard of education on the island, the children who will benefit most from that should be those children who currently underperform the most, which actually is those children who are most disadvantaged and those children who have special educational needs. So I absolutely believe that this is the right thing for them to do in the long term. I also absolutely accept that this is not an easy process and that we will have to work very proactively with children and families and staff in this phase of transition.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. I just want to make it clear to members of the public, if they're not aware, what happens now. This paper, the paper produced yesterday, goes for Cabinet for decision next Thursday. Cabinet meets here 5 o'clock next Thursday to take a decision on the paper. But prior to that, on Tuesday at 5 o'clock, Corporate Scrutiny will meet. And the role of Corporate Scrutiny is to analyse Cabinet papers, and it may well be that Corporate Scrutiny make recommendations to the Cabinet to be considered on Thursday. So there are 2 meetings next week. We'll have further opportunities to raise questions, just like we had a meeting for this committee in October when we scrutinised the whole process. But obviously, Corporate Scrutiny will now scrutinise the final decision paper. So, I'm sure many people will turn up next Tuesday and Thursday with further questions. Thank you to members for allowing an extension of public questions. And thanks to members of the public for coming and asking your questions. We'll move on to item number 5, which is a progress update for this committee. We did have one outstanding item regarding a list of upcoming children in care events, and that is covered under item 8 on the agenda when we get to it. So we'll move on to item number 6. It's a pleasure actually to welcome Crispin Drummond back to the island. Did you come in person last time? Was it virtual last time?
I'm with you. Yes, I did come here personally last time. Yes.
So it's a pleasure that you've managed to come across personally to give us your annual update on the first year's monitoring on the island. We've got a brief report in your packs. I'll let Mr. Drummond introduce his report, put some meat on the bones, then we'll open up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the welcome to me here today. So this is reporting on 1 year's worth of progress in the mentoring program that we introduced to the island a year ago. To recall, what we're seeking to do above all is to address a particular kind of problem, which is the underperformance in terms of outcomes of particularly the disadvantaged pupils at island schools who might well get good academic results at the A level, but not proceed to realise their potential with appropriate courses and universities, in the life to come. So what holds them back from making those applications and succeeding in getting on with their lives in the meritocratic way is the question we address. And the way we do that is to put decent quality mentors to sit with them once a fortnight or something for 6 months to help them untangle the aspects of timidity and inaction that might be in their minds and give them the confidence to try their best and get on with it. So that's what we do. I'll just address the focus for scrutiny points that I see on page 33, and then I'll ensure that I've covered them. So the first 2 are about how do we get the participants. We use the school, obviously, as a gatekeeper. We're working with schools on this. We're not going behind anybody's back, and we're not approaching pupils independently. So if the schools recommend them, then we do not second guess what they do. The criteria we suggest are that pupils should be academically able, because it's not fair to push them if they're not basically academically able, and willing, and in all probability have got some aspects of disadvantage in their home backgrounds that might mean there's material for us to work on, to be blunt. You might think in number terms that could be 10 to 15% of a sixth form. Those are the sorts of numbers we're talking about who would fit those criteria. Those are the numbers we kind of get from the schools, including the schools on the Isle of Wight. And so we have no further comments on that kind of points. Is it open to all people? Yes, subject to those criteria. Does it actually work? Well, yeah, we think so. And the kind of evidence, the short-term evidence we get, obviously, is asking them. And people don't turn up to meetings if they don't want to, and they don't see any value in it. So that's pretty important. And we do ask them at the end of the year whether they've, what particular points they've enjoyed and has it made a difference. And the results there are certainly 80% of them say it's transformational. This is very important, valuable stuff for their lifestyle. Likewise, the schools think it makes a difference because people that were looking a bit worried now look a bit confident. So that makes them happy. And it may well turn out to look good on the school's overall outcome statistics. And where we've worked for several years with schools, you can see the numbers improve of the outcomes of disadvantaged pupils going on to decent universities. Year by year, kind of gets better, and that gap is closed. So those are the metrics by which we operate. And it's got to be enjoyable for the mentors as well. These are decent people who are giving time quite over several months. So they've got to think that it's time well spent as well. How is it being monitored and evaluated? Kind of covered that. Ongoing support. Well, this isn't a program with a job description or with bullet point outcomes or feedbacks or anything like that. It's much more personal and things. And so, no, we don't micromanage. We trust professionals to act in a professional way, and what issues are raised and how they handle them is for them to do. So it's not quite like that. Okay, and I'll talk about the next bit in a second. So as I've written here, it's all going quite well. It's early days, but we've had very nice welcome from the 4 state sixth forms that there are here, which is Ryde Academy and Cowes Enterprise and Ireland Sixth Form and Christ the King. And we are on personal level working quite nicely, and their feedback after 1 year is pretty good. We've just had some meetings to improve and focus and things like that. But so far, so good. So just going forward, let me add to that. At the moment, this immediate news is at least 3 of the sixth forms on the island have got reduced numbers of pupils this year. I don't know where they've gone, but they all think it's gone to each other, but it's not true. And so when you find them, do let us know. And we must adjust a little bit downwards the scope of what we do, but only for that reason. When it works, the kind of mentoring we do is precise and targeted. It is efficient. It doesn't actually take much time. And it is transformative. And it's a catalyst that succeeds for 3 reasons. One is that it does acknowledge that children can be different, and therefore they can be a bit isolated in a school that has a one-size-fits-all approach. This is a necessary observation. No criticism, but that's why it kind of matters that we're there. Secondly, we treat pupils as though they're subjects, not objects, because they're just about at the adult level. They're being required to make their own decisions, so they're just about ready for it. You know that. And that's why this is the triangle of forces. It provokes them to engage and sort out their own issues for themselves and buy into the projects, and they are self-sufficient thereafter. So it has a purpose and it has an end to it. And we know that we've done a good job if we can let go with confidence, and they're proceeding with a sense of awareness and aspiration. So that's says it in a nutshell. And that's true for the projects that we do in other schools as well. So I've worked quite a lot with schools in Hampshire, and so I can see what figures. One place where the island schools are different, you know perfectly well, is that it's an island. And it's a bit of a challenge for pupils from the island to consider university opportunities in other places, and this can mean money. And it's very expensive to go to university open days, and I'm a little surprised to find that the schools here don't have provision for that, and they kind of should do if they're trying to be supportive of their disadvantaged pupils in particular, because that odd £150 or something is vital at that moment. It's not the biggest number in the world, but they need that there. That's an issue I'm raising. Secondly, some of the schools here have still not really bought into the idea that disadvantaged pupils need that extra something. They don't have a tasked member of staff who's looking out for disadvantaged pupils to prioritize their aspirations, not when they're feeling, sad or they're in trouble or something, but just to get the grey-faced sort of ghost-like ones to step forward into the limelight and push themselves forward. And other schools across the country do have such a member of staff dedicated to that. It's not many hours, but it's that focus that makes the difference. So accordingly, the challenge I see, which is going to be fine, but it is a challenge for the time being, is that none of the island schools have yet moved to adopt and broaden the approach that we're offering so that it's kind of institutionalized and it's there. They still, my fear is that they regard it as a nice to have, but not vital. Now, the students think it's vital. You look at their feedback, we think it's vital. That's why we're here. But in the next year or two, we hope that the grown-ups, catch up with that and bring it into an institutional part of the organization. And at that point, you'll be glad to know that outsiders like me, are no longer necessary because it's part of the furniture. And the dream I have for the relationships with the schools on the island is what we are accomplishing with the schools that we're dealing with in Hampshire, where we've been 5 or 10 years. That it's part of the furniture within the school to do these things. They don't need outsiders. They can find their own mentors, actually, from parents and other people, and so forth. It becomes part of the furniture. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Questions, members, questions? Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Crispin. I can't remember being here for the last time you were here. Maybe I missed that meeting, so apologies if some of these questions have been asked and answered before. But what kind of help and guidance is offered by mentors to mentees?
Our mentors are nice, upstanding members of the community. They've often gone to quite good universities. They've often got quite good professional backgrounds somewhere, and clearly they've got time on their hands. So Isle of Wight does have such people who are retired, who need to be engaged in things like this. Some of the mentors are serving professionals at the moment, including NHS staff, oddly enough. And so I trust them, and I've checked with them and so forth, that they have competence, experience, and things at listening. Because the one thing we're not doing is helping them with their academic outcomes. They go to pretty good schools, they've got pretty good teachers, and we're not absolutely going to get involved in that. We're presuming that is going all right, but sit down a disadvantaged pupil and you'll find there's a whole lot of obstacles in their minds, perhaps, that they don't think it's for them, they don't know that they're that good, they've heard about these things, but they don't know which way to go about it, even while other children in the class are proceeding quite happily to fill out their application forms and things. These are the quiet ones, I suppose, that were assisting. And all we do is listen and then probably use Socratic dialogue to say, is that really a problem? Have you tried looking at this? Let's just consider that more carefully. I think just helping through like that. And for some pupils, time and again, they say they've never been spoken to like this before. They've never seen such role modeling of an adult working through an uncertainty towards a decision that is not definitive, it's only provisional, but it's better than nothing. And that sort of thinking is remarkably unknown to pupils who haven't got that kind of conversation going on in school, haven't got friends who actually converse with them, certainly not at home. And those are the problems, therefore, that are seeking solutions.
And supplementary, Councillor Lever, yeah?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess just on that, does the programme have universities that it's aiming to guide mentees towards?
As a sweeping statement, Russell Group.
Okay.
As a sweeping statement. And by the way, these are the statistics that the ONS uses. So we like the ONS and we like their statistics. And they look at who, school by school, you can see what is the number of pupils that has got 2 A's and a B. That's their mantra. And then what is the percentage that has gone off to Russell Group type universities? And if you are you know, a normal member of the public, you might nod at that and say, yeah, if you get grades like that, I guess that's where you should be going, kind of. And that's why it's a fair, rough test. If you then check across certain schools we're thinking of, some of them do accomplish that and others do not. And some of them do accomplish that with their disadvantaged pupils. If they get the grades, they're off to good places, and others do not. Those are the gaps we're looking for.
Councillor Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask the mentors, do you place the mentors with pupils, you know, that because people have got to relate to each other, haven't they? And what I'm sort of saying is that, you know, the mentor to make sure that they're relatable to the actual pupil. Does
Yes.
that make sense?
Yes, the exact purpose is to help the pupil, especially if they're not used to it, in conducting a sensible adult conversation with a sensible adult, and as a consequence of, you know, dialogue, whereby I back and forth advance, learn from that process, from the experience, but also from the role play about how to solve the problems that they face. But yes, it does require them to sit in a room together and talk at each other.
No, what I'm trying to say is that some people relate to other people better than others.
A little bit, but I don't think that's a concern.
You don't?
No,
Okay.
I mean, anybody should be able to have a discussion with, I don't know, their dentist or their doctor or something. You know, you have to work on a professional level with people, and that is the requirement at university, and might as well practice a year or so earlier. So it's a fair test, I believe.
And some pupils are going to take longer than others to achieve that.
That is true, and we are bound by the timetable of the sixth form and the university application process as it is. And those who really cannot figure it out in time, I think, ought to take an extra year until they can. That's true. No one's forcing them, but there is that timetable of getting the application form in time, which is the primary timetable that people are looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you. My first question is similar to what Councillor Downer just said. You know, if the school's going to come forward with X number of pupils, you're going to come to the table with X number of mentors.
Yeah.
On professional level, yes, they'll interact.
Yeah.
But below that, there's an emotional level of interaction as well. So who actually do you talk to the school about? Yeah, the strengths and, you know, of matching the people together, or do they sort of just
in principle, yes, but I'm not clever enough to divide people between sheep and goats like that. And there have been occasions when the chemistry isn't quite right, so you just switch them. And there have been occasions, in different answer to your question, where after, you know, weeks of trying, the pupil will not open up. They will not answer a flipping question when it's put to them, and it's just not working. You know, come back in 6 months when you've wised up a bit, but with no harm done. But that can happen, sure.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Crispin, for your report. And it's something that I've seen happen myself, not through your programme, but I relate back to when I was at sixth form. We had Paul Thatcher as a teacher, and he had gone to Oxford. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he saw the opportunity for a lot of our students to push themselves and basically make that link and make them realise that Oxford isn't this magical place like Hogwarts that you can't really get into. It's somewhere that you can, as someone from Southampton High School at the time, you could go to. So he used to do things like take students up trips up to Oxford and show them that you can get there and help them with their personal statements and stuff like that. So I can see exactly how your programme must help students. My first question is you have 16 mentors with allocated 2 students each. Is there more demand on the pupil side, or have you got mentors that are currently not allocated to a child?
Today, I've got half a dozen unemployed mentors.
Okay.
If you ask me tomorrow, it might be a different answer, but it's very current.
Okay, that's brilliant. And you mentioned about the flexibility around the timetable. Are these mentors dealing with these children in their free periods during the timetable, or is it extracurricular?
It's pretty much within the timetable at the school. If we can find a space, we get a car park, we get a room, we get a cup of coffee, we go for it.
Councillor Churchman.
Yes, what worries me is having parents with no ambition, and I'm afraid on the Isle of Wight, where jobs are limited, how do the students come out with this problem that in fact they have very unambitious parents? Do they mention it? Do you find that it creates a block?
It can, yes, it is a subject, and yes, it can be a block, and of course, it can be a perceived block rather than an actual block. You never know till you find out. The key question for any professional is, who is your client? So our client is the pupil, and the school is the gatekeeper, and the parents and indeed grandparents are somewhere in the background, and so are their best friends and mates and things. You know, there's a lot of moving parts in this, but we will address the pupil, and that can come to the point of questioning, not challenging, but questioning how their parents are supporting this and so on. And normally there are reservations, and normally there are agreeable answers, because actually the mums, love them to pieces and want what's best for them, but don't really know what to do next, and they're not wanting to encourage them in an inappropriate way. They're all lost in space with the best will in the world, I suppose. But if there is an absolute block, then there's nothing more we can do except comment to the pupil. This is what we can see, and these are the questions that there are. In another country, like China, you might think there's social engineering, and we call up the police and frog march them to the university that's right for them, but not at all. We don't do that in this country. We just help them to make an informed decision. And from time to time, but not often, the pupil will come back and say, well, you say I could do these things, but I always wanted to go, no further than Fareham or something. But if that's the limit of their ambition at this time, then we must stop and respect their decision. So,
Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. I guess kind of related to that is, do mentors or the programme kind of, is there any sort of follow-on support? So say a mentee does get into the university that you've been working towards, is there any sort of follow-on support at that point? Or I'm just thinking of, I know friends of mine coming from a working class background got into, surprisingly, into a prestigious university. They've got there and they felt quite isolated because there's not many people like them when they get there. And obviously, I'm just wondering,
it's a great question. It's a great question.
Yeah, we've helped guide them into this space. And it's
the answer is yes, or possibly yes-ish. It's not coming from us particularly, because we let go, and it is a correct time to let go because they're off on their own and so on. And that's the end of that particular need. Sometimes we hear back from the school, or indeed from the individual, this is what happened next, because we're curious, and it kind of hurts the heart if you don't know what happened next. But that's just information, that's not of pupil and such. And then we do find, it's a great question actually, before you apply to certain universities, because Bristol has got a terrible reputation for various reasons, and Manchester and so on, because of how they behave during COVID and things like that. And that's all over the internet, so no point ignoring the fact that challenges are there. And those universities and several others have come back strongly to say, and we support you, we support particular minorities, particular demographics even more, and we take care to provide buddies and systems and processes and support groups. So on paper, they all look like they've transformed, and whatever experience you've got is no longer true. And there are answers to those questions to go along and find out for yourself. You're satisfied with those answers, but it is a good question, or rather it was a good question. And most universities have got very strong answers at this time to cover that point, because they need to be well regarded on the internet as well. And the student satisfaction survey is the most important thing in many universities.
I've got one question actually. I'm interested in one paragraph near the end. You're saying that we believe that with the help of wider measures across the community to build awareness and celebrate success, numbers will improve over the next 3 to 5 years. Can you elaborate on what you mean by sort of across the community, and where do you see the numbers being in 3 or 5 years? We've got 16 good mentors now. with two children, with two pupils each.
Well,
Is that, how far can this go?
Sweeping generalisation on the numbers that the numbers from all the secondary schools for last year have been held up by the ONS. So I don't know what the latest figures are, but they're due out in February or something. But when we see that, then I will look at those numbers and I will tell you, according to my thinking, the Isle of Wight should be producing this many Russell Group undergraduates in a year, and at the moment they're only half that level. You know, it's our job to get them up there a bit. It's not true to say that we have magic wands that are going to do it all by ourselves, but we need eventually different kinds of support from parents. You mentioned that, teachers being agreeable, being a bit better resourced in certain ways, and all kinds of peer group things as well, because once you hear that the boy in the house next door has done this, or my mate has been looking at that, then it becomes a sort of favourable kind of infection across society that these are things we can all do. And I don't think, the newspapers in Hampshire, where I'm from, or the newspapers here either, do as much as they could to celebrate academic success for students when compared to sporting success. You always have a big headline when you've got an Olympic gold medal winner, but you never have it when somebody's done quite well with their exams. And, the whole society could change in those ways. And that's the generality. But I did mention 2 points where secondary schools themselves could have points of resource to make it more institutional. I said that.
Thank you. So maybe just any questions from yourself, Ashley?
I don't have a question. We actually met before the meeting, which was very helpful. I mean, my observation would be we really welcome this external expertise coming in. And I think we need to work as broadly as we can with the expertise we have available to us on the island, and also people coming across from the mainland in the shared best interests of children and young people. And so often it's the case, isn't it, that actually interacting with other organisations, there might be voluntary sector organisations, there may be commercial organisations, but the more we can provide that system leadership to bring people together and bring in their expertise and work towards a common goal, the better outcomes we will be able to deliver for our children and young people. So I'm really grateful to Crispin and his colleagues for doing the work that they do. If I had one question, if I've got time, it would be about it would be something about the age that we're working with, and actually do we feel that there would be benefit to be working with younger students as well, for example, at pre-GCSE level?
Yes, we do, and that is a how long is a piece of string argument. Academics think that some people's predispositions are fully in place by the age of 7. And there are people who are studying the content of children's storybooks at 7 to see where they get their fixed ideas about being a fireman or something accordingly. And that's not trivial, it's true. We are not venturing there. We do have a pilot project at the moment for feeder schools, which is definitely secondary school, about the age of 14, which we think is a lovely age because they're so biddable and open-minded at that level. And they're not quite besotted by GCSE. So that's where we go for 14. And for 3 or 4 years now, we've been working in 10 or 15 secondary schools, which are not on the Isle of Wight, but I suppose you could, to address slightly different questions, but in any way, get them to think, get them to talk about ambition, get them to see about steps forward. And then the 3 mantra points that I have are to take themselves seriously as an individual, that they will do their best at GCSEs, because good enough isn't good enough. To choose wisely the A-level subjects they have, because they are complete clowns if they choose the wrong combination, and it's too late by the time they get to 6th form. And thirdly, to choose the right 6th form, because they do have a choice, and some are better than others, let's be honest. So that's what we have there.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Yes, Councillor Lever.
Sorry, Chair. I guess just to kind of wrap us up on that point, I'm quite interested in Crispin. I think you were alluding to it before and just then about in fact this is about volunteers at this point, but how do we eventually get to a point where this is formalised within schools and there's dedicated resource to this, so you can kind of back away if you so wish, or even go for those roles yourself. So I'm just interested in how this committee sort of follows this progress, and is that where we want to end up, and how do we ensure we get there? I don't know who that's a question to necessarily, but it's a,
My final point was going to be, that obviously, we are changing to committee structure from the 2nd of May next year. But there'll still be a committee focused on children's service and education, will just be the decision-making body as opposed to a cabinet member. So I would propose that we invite Crispin back next year to put another update at the same time next year. And that would be my proposal to your point, really. I think it's important we keep following this up now.
Can I just give him a?
You may, of course you can.
My dream is that schools take on board the responsibility to do something extra for their disadvantaged pupils, including something like this, including the resources that I mentioned and things. And the schools that do that broaden that responsibility to bring the parents on board and their governors and things like that. And where we are working with schools that do source their own mentors, it's from those kind of sources, or indeed from local businesses in the communities that say, how can I help? But the schools are alert to the fact they have a need for mentors and they have their own stakeholders out there, and that's where they get them from. But it's down to each school to devise its own policy. And then, just because I'm going to give 2 answers, 1 or 2 schools around here have been criticised by Ofsted for not doing enough for all of their demographics and things. And by contrast, one of the schools we work with in Hampshire has just been Ofsteded, and Ofsted put a whole paragraph in their report saying, we particularly like the way you're dealing with your disadvantaged pupils, and we particularly commend the OUS mentoring program because that's what you know. So it ticks various boxes, and it's the school's responsibility to do the best for their own pupils.
I think what would be nice at the same time next year, when the presentation comes up again with the update in progress, will be to have some perhaps testimonials from the schools, from the 4 schools, to actually attach a report on how they found it.
Sure.
Yeah, it all
That's
sounds great, and I fully support the mentoring programme. And we were saying the 4 schools interact with you. I'd just like to perhaps hear from the school's perspective, you know, what their view is. I think perhaps we can have an annual report next year at the same time to the new committee with testimonials from the 4 schools. That'd be my proposal. So, members happy? Yeah, I think we'll put that as an action for next year.
That's fine.
To have the testimonials attached to the report, which would be great. Even invite some heads in to come and talk about it, whatever. But to take it, you know, keep this programme going. I've got the momentum going, keep it going.
That's very nice. I like that. Thank you.
Without any more questions, thank you so much for your report. Thanks for all you've done on the mentoring. It sounds like it's been a success. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish, or you can make your way back to the mainland, wherever you wish to do so.
That's very good.
Thank you for coming to see
everybody.
me. Thank you.
Thanks for your questions. Thank you.
We move on to item number 7, which is the Children's Services Performance and Transition update, which I assume is from Mr. Whittaker.
It is me, thank you. Good evening again. So this report covers 3 main things. The first thing is an update on the operational financial performance of the Children's Services Directorate. The second thing is around an update on the planning for services currently being delivered under service level agreements by Hampshire County Council. And the third area is any other priorities that we have. So you've had the report. I'm assuming you've read that. I just wanted to put out a few things. 7 things, actually. The first thing I wanted to say is that across children on the Isle of Wight, we continue to see high levels of need. So in terms of children presenting with special educational needs and disabilities, requests for education, health, care needs assessments, emotional wellbeing, mental health, and within the children's social care arena, we continue to see high levels of need. And of course, what that means is there's significant amounts of work going through the teams across the directorate. 3 things I've picked out, I think we can be pleased with how things are going that I wanted to highlight. And the first one is actually hot off the press because it was just published today by Ofsted, but I did refer to it in the report. And I think you've got some printouts with you. So what happened at the end of October and early November, we had what's called a focused visit from Ofsted. And this is part of the framework that's called the Inspection of Local Authority Children's Services. And they came to do a focused visit specifically on children in need and children with a child protection plan. And I said in the report that we were pleased with the findings of the inspection. And I wanted just to read out a couple of sentences from the letter. It says this in the section around headline findings. Leaders have produced an accurate self-assessment and are establishing strong foundations to support further improvement in the quality and impact of social work practice. Most children with a child in need or child protection plan in the Isle of Wight are being helped to have their needs better met or to be safer. Many weaknesses in specific areas of practice identified at the last inspection have been tackled effectively, although children's plans still vary in quality. Leaders know that there is more to do to ensure that all work with children and families is purposeful, and they are clearly focused on driving the necessary improvements for a more effective and impactful quality assurance framework. So overall, we're pleased with what inspectors have said. There's a lot more work that remains to be done, but they confirmed that we have an accurate understanding of ourselves and we have an appropriate plan to deliver those improvements, and those improvements have already started. The second thing I wanted to say is I think we'll continue to make good progress with transparency and understanding the needs of the children, young people and families that we serve. And the two examples I wanted to give with that was, first of all, the Local Government Association Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Peer Challenge that we had in early October, and the link to the report was shared with the pack. That's been very, very helpful. Of course, special educational needs and disability is not just about the council. It's about the council, the integrated care board, health providers, early years providers, schools, colleges, the voluntary sector, everyone who's involved in supporting children and young people with special educational needs. So that was a very useful report, and we'll be using it to drive an update and action plan around the transformation of special educational needs and disabilities provision on the island. The second thing I wanted to highlight was the point I made in the report that we've got 3 new colleagues who have come on board to help us identify the improvements that are needed and to start implementing them. One of them is a sufficiency lead. I'm not going to say too much about that because Mark will cover that in his report in the next item. But in terms of understanding, for example, the needs of the children that we care for, the sorts of homes they would be best suited to, making sure that we've got enough numbers of the right types of homes for them, and work relating to that. So I think we're making good progress with that. And the third thing I think I'd like to say is that I believe we're on track with a caveat, which I'll come to in a minute, with establishing the services that are currently being delivered by Hampshire. So the one which has received the most focus is the multi-agency safeguarding hub, sometimes referred to as the MASH, which arrangements with Hampshire will be ceasing at the end of March. We brought a colleague in September to lead the delivery of that. Of course, it's not only the council, it requires a really joined up multi-agency response because the other statutory leads with that are the police and the NHS, but we have a good multi-agency team working on those arrangements. We have the independent scrutineer who's going to be talking to us as chair of the Safeguard and Children's Partnership in a later item, who's also involved in that to provide some external scrutiny around it. We're on track to have the MASH up and running here in County Hall in February, which will give us some double running time to iron out any issues that arise before Hampshire arrangements cease at the end of March. So those are the things I wanted to highlight that I think we can be pleased about how things are going. Some areas of concern, worry indeed, 3 of them. The first one is around recruitment. So one of the service areas that we need to establish following the end of the arrangements with Hampshire is the educational psychology service. We need educational psychologists to meet our statutory duties around education, health care needs assessments and for wider matters as well. They are in very short supply nationally, mainly because the numbers of education healthcare plans nationally has been going up about 10% a year for the last at least 5 years. Every single plan requires an educational psychologist assessment, and because of that, they're very busy and there's a shortage of them. We have not yet recruited any educational psychologists. We've been advertising since September. We do have some interest In the meantime, we do have requests coming in for needs assessments. So we are talking to an organisation who will, we hope quite soon, start providing assessments remotely, so that those assessments that we're receiving from schools and families can actually be addressed prior to the recruitment of permanent colleagues. The second one is around recruitment, is continuing social workers. So we continue to have high levels of agency colleagues, which we actually really welcome because they bring huge breadth of experience and expertise, and they bring huge value to the team. And though longer term, we want to build our permanent workforce. And that is challenging because across the country, local authorities are generally needing to recruit more social workers because there are more children who are subject to a child protection plan, are child in need, or are in care. And because of that, local authorities need more social workers to deliver their statutory duties. So we are continuing to work on that. One of the opportunities that we're exploring is international recruitment. A number of local authorities have been working with organisations to go to other countries and bring teams of social workers over from other countries. They would relocate into the local authority and become part of our community as permanent members of the workforce. We're exploring that. If people have got views on that, we really welcome. The second area of concern is around the availability of specialist placements. So I spoke about the increase in needs of children. And whilst we believe that there are opportunities for more children to have their needs met, for example, in mainstream schools or in mainstream foster care, for example, some children have high levels of need where they need a specialist placement. And because that is also something that's happening nationally, there is a shortage of those placements. And we're having to work very hard to find appropriate homes, but it links to what Mark will talk about in a minute. And that links to the third point I wanted to say, was just about the financial challenges that we have. It's in the report, I've shared the numbers where we are at the moment with expenditure from the high needs block of the dedicated schools grant and also general fund relating mostly to children's social care. And you'll see that there is expenditure in excess of budget. So if we look, for example, in our year-on-year expenditure on children's social care, it's up year-on-year about 6.5%. And that is fairly typical. In fact, compared with some authorities, there's actually considerably less than what's happening around the country. That is driven by the needs of children and the costs of meeting those needs, whether it be with homes or the specialist provision that they might need. So that is an ongoing concern, and we're working on a number of things to try and meet the needs of those children at a lower cost. So that's what I was going to say. Happy to take questions or divert some questions to Mark.
Thank you very much for your report. Councillor Blake, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Ashley. I mean, this report is sobering reading for anyone who wasn't too aware of how dire really the school situation is. Then this report makes no bones about that. One particular point I sort of question that doesn't seem to be addressed in the following part of the report is on page 76 into 77.1.3. It states that it should be noted, however, that one of these schools has just been judged as outstanding, which indicates there is nothing intrinsic to the environment or child population in the Isle of Wight that prevents schools performing at the highest standard. The two there, environment, suggests that is the environment that the council is creating as the education authority. To me, I'd like to your interpretation of that, and obviously the children is the children. Is that attributing blame to the staff with that? It doesn't seem to pick up on that point as to what if the Holy Trinity is such of the authority, the children and the schools creating the school's output, what the blame is being attributed to there.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, so I think the point that the colleagues were making there is that that if you can deliver outcomes and be judged to have education standards like that in that school, then there are opportunities for that quality of education to happen in other schools as well. So I don't think they're apportioning blame to.
So I'm more asking if the environment's okay and the children can be okay, there is obviously a part there that's been suggested that isn't okay, and it doesn't address that.
Yes, so I think they're saying that the quality of what's happening in schools could improve. And the fact that 9 Acre School was judged to be outstanding demonstrates that it can be done on the Isle of Wight. And that is what the draft education strategy that we have on the island is about. It's about driving up outcomes for all children.
So you're saying it's on the schools to change things in order to make that go from being require improvement or good up to the outstanding?
I don't think it's just the schools, no. I think it's all the people who are involved in supporting children, young people and families. So for example, I would make the point that, you know, we currently have a school improvement service, which we commission from Hampshire. And so that's the role of the local authority. You know, we have a role to improve education outcomes on the island. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is recruiting for that school improvement service. And so we will, when we have done that, when the service level agreement with Hampshire ends next year, we will then take on that school improvement drive, you know, in-house. So absolutely, the council has a role to play, and we intend to improve the quality of what's been done historically going forward. Schools, yes, they do have a role to play. We want to work with governors as well, because I think governors have an important role to play. We want to work with families to make sure that parents and carers can play, you know, the role that they can in this. So, for example, children and young people with special educational needs might need some extra help and support, but actually children spend a lot more time out of school than they do in school. So what you quite often find, for example, is at the end of summer holidays, for example, children come back and they come back into school, and actually, you know, their levels of attainment at the end of summer holidays might be lower than it is at the end of the summer term. So what role, for example, can we have parents and carers play, not just for children with special education needs and disabilities, but all children, to keep things, you know, up ticking along over the summer as well. So I think so clearly schools have a role to play. The council has a role to play through its school improvement department, but also, you know, lots of all the other organisations play a role as well. In fact, we're doing some, I think, really interesting work with the High Sheriff at the moment, bringing voluntary sector groups together to look at the role that voluntary sector groups play in supporting children. And I believe that one of the impacts of that will be that if we can encourage children to be more engaged with education, some of those that have fallen out of love with education, and get them back into education, you know, that will help as well. So I think the council basically has a system leadership role in education. We don't have all the levers to control it, particularly because we have academies as well as maintained schools. But what we can do is act as a system leader, working with our own school improvement function, but providing leadership across the whole system, voluntary sector, you know, other groups as well, to bring them all together, because that will all help.
Councillor Churchman, you down next.
One quick question. We talk about special education and needs, etc. Is that basically in primary school, or are there more of those children in secondary? Because being a governor of primary school, I see. So with these educational needs, do they transfer through to the secondary schools? Because at the moment, we seem to have so many primary school children with special needs. I find it frightening. So that's the first question.
So yeah, if a child has special educational needs and they're at primary school and they go to secondary school, then yes, they will also have special educational needs there. I think it's important to distinguish between you the levels of needs within that, because some children have relatively low level, mild special educational needs, and some children have more significant needs. The majority of children who have an SEN, special educational need or disability, do not have an educational healthcare plan. The minority do have an educational healthcare plan. And it's up to schools under the SEN Code of Practice to make reasonable adjustments to meet those needs. What you do quite often find actually is that children who have a special educational need have it met at primary school, and things are able to be met at primary school. But when they go to secondary school, those needs tend to become more pronounced. And there is reasons around that. For example, primary schools tend to be smaller, more nurturing environments. And for example, the child goes to the same classroom every day. They have one teacher, and suddenly they transition to a year 7 secondary school that may have 1,000 people in it. They have to navigate their way around the school, go to different classrooms. They might have 8 or 9, 10 different teachers. And that can be a big challenge for some children who have special educational needs. So sometimes what happens, if those needs aren't met, then their needs can escalate, and you tend to find an increase in the number of children who then have needs assessment requests made because secondary schools are saying, actually, we now can't meet need without an education and healthcare plan.
It's more of a comment. I find it incredible that we have falling school roles, and yet we seem to be getting more children who are SEN. And to me, the link that is missing seems to be the parents. And when I look at Haylands, and we now know that there are many children starting primary who are still coming to school in nappies. So I'm thinking, are we not concentrating on the most important bit, which is the parents? Because I look at my teachers and I think they're nothing but social workers. They're not doing the job they were trained for. And the children aren't getting a proper education because their social needs are having to be addressed all the time. So as I said, falling school roles, and yet there's this gap. I know you talk about working with families, but even so, is it because abdicated responsibility for their children? The school will do it, or their grandparents? I just find this quite worrying and frightening.
So I think the reason we're seeing an increase in need is very complicated, and it is an issue that's being seen across the country, and there's lots of hypotheses about why this is happening. Some people talk about a change in parenting practice. Some people talk about during the COVID pandemic that children weren't out and about learning how to communicate with other younger children. So when they arrived at nursery, for example, they didn't have the same level of development around speech and language and communication, for example. So if they're then falling behind in terms of those communication skills, that can have significant knock-on effects. So what we're looking to do is make sure that all the different parts of the system, back, I guess, to the previous point I was making around system leadership, that all the different parts of the system are working together. So, for example, on the island, there's what's called the First 1,001 Days project, which essentially is working with from conception basically through until the child is coming into early years provision, working with the NHS, with health visitors, through family hubs to make sure that parents are getting support around parenting, and they're doing everything they can to make sure that when children arrive at school, that they are school ready and ready to learn. Because you're absolutely right in what you described. There are children who are arriving at school who aren't perhaps ready to learn because they haven't had what's they needed in their lives in the years leading up to that. So it is a priority for us.
Andy, I'll bring you in a second. My question is fairly similar, actually, in so much as when I was cabinet member, one of my concerns was educational health care plans and the way they follow through the schools. To Councillor Churchman's point, I sat in on several panels where EHCPs were awarded, and I'd had the time for Jonathan, Debbie may agree, to actually review those plans on an annual basis to make them more proactive, especially when they change schools. Some plans would increase the care needed. Some plans should decrease the care needed because the child has, made that level of progress. I think when the transition from one school to another, there was definitely here's the plan rather than a talk through what's actually happening on the plan. Is that still an issue in your opinion?
Yes, and it's one of the recommendations. Oh, sorry, you're going to do that.
I was going to say, yes, I think this actually goes back to some of the questions that were being asked at the beginning of the meeting about the capacity of schools to deliver what they need to deliver. I did want to interject, and I didn't give my apologies at the beginning, Chair, but I've got Brading Town Council to attend, so I will have to leave in a couple of minutes. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
I'm sure you would sooner stay here than. Yeah, no,
I think I'm required there. But I'm sure Mr. Whitaker can provide a fuller answer to that, but I concur with what you say. Yeah.
Wish to add to that?
Well, just to say, the subject of annual reviews and the quality of annual reviews is one of the recommendations that the LGA made, and the importance of the annual review process to making sure that the needs of children are kept up to date and the interventions that need are kept up to date as well.
I'm also aware as a school governor, of course, the time it takes to do those reviews, the evidence you have to gather, and schools feeds back to the first point about schools that have reduced capacity now and budget pressures. That's one thing that possibly has been, had to slip or been allowed to slip or whatever. And it's an area that feeds into the whole place planning situation, isn't it? Councillor Baker, thank you for your attendance this evening. Welcome. Councillor Lever, sorry to interject there, but I love that word.
I feel like we strayed somewhat off path a little bit, but what sort of reasons do children in our care live off the island? And it suggested, I think, the lack of foster availability on the island is one. Is it pretty much that is the case, or is there other more reasons? And do the costs differ for comparable children, whether they're on the island or off the island?
Thank you and good evening.
Mark, welcome.
Hi there. Cost-wise, it's tricky. It's not so much a difference in cost. Obviously, it really does depend upon the needs of the child and complexities of the child, to be fair. So the more complex the needs, the more costly it's going to be. It really is quite as straightforward as that. With regards to numbers of children that live off the island, number of reasons. Clearly, the first one is we'd like to have more foster carers on the island, and I'll touch on a report in a minute about what we hope to do with that. We want to keep as many children here on the island as we can. It's important to do so as their families, schools, and local communities. But it's fair to say that recruitment of foster carers is really tricky. We're kind of fishing from the same pool. We're an island. It makes it quite challenging at times. So yeah, but sometimes, their needs cannot be met on the island, and actually we have to look for more specialist provisions off island. But our aim is always to keep children on the island as close as possible. But yes, we could do some more foster carers for sure.
May I have a supplementary, Councillor Lever?
Thank you. Off on a little different tangent, but I was looking at the interim care orders. Do we know roughly what percentage of interim care orders end up with, after assessment, end up escalating from that point?
So you're asking a question about the next report, the children in care report, I think, are you? Because we're on item 7, but we can answer questions on that.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I'd just like to ask, you spoke about the MASH and when is there a date for it to be installed? Because what I was going to ask you is, will you have the capacity as social workers to actually man it without the detriment of drawing them in off the field? Thank you.
So we believe we will have capacity by February. So we've appointed a number of posts already. And I was really pleased that we've appointed someone to lead the MASH on the island, who is an existing member of staff, who will be transferring from one of the other teams. The reason I was really pleased that we were able to appoint them is that they have the island knowledge, and that's so key for the MASH role. And so it could be that in terms of what we need to do is then backfill their position rather than it being extra recruitment into the MASH. So it is difficult. I'm not going to say it isn't difficult, but I do believe we'll be able to. We may need to go to the agency market in order to bring in colleagues to do that. The other thing, I mean, the MASH also requires police and also colleagues from health. And also you have people in there who aren't necessarily qualified social workers. So it's not all social workers in there, although social workers are probably the most challenging in terms of the skill set that we need within it to have. But I believe we will be able to do that either through permanent staff or through the agency market.
You may, Councillor Downey.
Yeah, just to say that I did visit the MASH on the main. I'm very impressed with that. It's Stuart Ashley. But could you tell me off the top of your head what the sort of turnover of social workers over here is? Is it high, or do they stay in the profession very long? Thank you.
So we were really pleased about what Ofsted said about the workforce. So actually, the turnover of social workers at the moment is, I'm quite pleased with how it is. And actually, although we have significant numbers of agency colleagues, some of those agency colleagues have been here for quite a long time. So in terms of the quality of their practice and the relationships that they have with families and with children and young people, they are benefiting from people being here a long time. We have had some success actually in people who came to the island as agency staff becoming permanent members of staff, and I'd love that to happen more. So a lot of this is around the culture that we're building and the working conditions and the support that they're getting from leadership to make it a place where people want to work. And actually, I'm really pleased with what Ofsted said in the letter about that towards the end of the letter. Because I think if I was a social worker and I was looking for a job and I read this letter, which is what social workers will do, and they read what Ofsted said about what social workers said, all staff who spoke to inspectors were highly complimentary about working in children's social care services on the Isle of Wight. They described a warm and welcoming culture where they feel cared about, respected and valued. And that's exactly the sort of culture that we are looking to build on the island, which will minimise the amount of turnover we have in the workforce and will allow our colleagues to build long-term relationships with children and families.
I will allow myself 2 questions, if I may. First question, obviously, I was a little bit concerned that after since September, we still haven't found an education psychologist. Is that because we're not offering the high enough salary to attract the right person? Or is it just there's not the skill set available out there to take on posts that really, because obviously it's an important role, a specialist role. Is it salary or is it just the availability of the skilled range?
We have increased the salary and improved the terms and conditions now compared with what we started off with. I think we started off at a very reasonable level because we needed to test the market. And we are now at a level where we are attracting considerably more interest. And though it's not just about that, there is a significant national shortage of educational psychologists. I don't know of a local authority that doesn't have a significant backlog of requests to complete education and healthcare plans. I don't know of a local authority that isn't looking to recruit them. So I think it's a combination of both. The island is at a disadvantage being an island because we're not surrounded by educational psychologists. Some live on the island and work on the mainland. Some live on the mainland and have a range of local authorities they could work for. It's also one of those sectors where working remotely 100% of the time seems to have become the norm. You know, if you live in Northumberland, you could be completing needs assessments for children living in Kent. And so you could argue, therefore, we're not at a disadvantage. But what it does mean is that, you know, it's a very open market for educational psychologists. They know absolutely that there's a huge shortage of them. The rate, you know, the day rate for an educational psychologist now is somewhere in the order of 650 to 700 pounds a day. And that is what they can charge. So if you compare that with other professions, it's quite high, isn't it? And actually, if you go and work privately as an EP, not for a local authority, you can earn even more. So it's not surprising that educational psychologists are often leaving local authority work and choosing to work less days, less hours for more money. And that is the reality of the situation. So I share your concern, as do colleagues across the country, because it's a real challenge. The other thing about it is what a lot of educational psychologists say is statutory work on its own isn't the most attractive work. You know, doing an assessment, writing it up isn't the most attractive work. What educational psychologists love to do and actually have the opportunity to make a real impact on is actually change whole school practice, to work with school colleagues on how do you create an inclusive environment in a mainstream school. That's the exciting work. So what we're looking to do is attract colleagues who will, yes, part of the time they'll have to deliver the statutory duties of the authority, but also they can be part of our journey of education improvement.
My second question, speaking as a vice chair of governors and from the school contacts I've still got, there's a lot of the concern in the schools, putting aside place planning, is around the transference or loss of Hampshire's School Improvement Service. I know we're trying to put that support in place, but it takes a little while for, I know the Hampshire employees, but they've got to know the schools really well over. You could argue, of course, with standards still not where they need to be, has it been effective? But you get to know the school. So schools are concerned that that support will just stop one day, someone else will be appointed the next day, and it will take a little bit of time to find a working relationship and get to know the schools. That is a concern when we're trying to drive up standards, and those relationships are going to sort of take a bottom out again. So, you know, how would you address that one?
Well, we're addressing that by recruiting as quickly as we can. And they'll be, as soon as we have them up and running and the Hampshire arrangements cease, they'll be out and about building relationships with schools. Although again, like with all this transition, there is a period of transition where life is more difficult than it will be, you know, when relationships are more established.
Could there be a crossover? Or sort of like not a handover as such, but could there be a small crossover, possibly?
So we are having some crossover in some areas. So, for example, the multi-agency safeguarding hub, it's possible there might be some crossover. We'll have to wait and see which colleagues get appointed and when they can start. Of course, there would be a cost implication for that in terms of double running services.
Councillor Churchman.
Just an offshoot suggestion. We are obviously going to have quite a lot of spare teachers, etc. Would there be any merit in trying to find one or two of them who could become educational psychologists if the council put them on a degree course? Because there are some people who won't want to leave the island who would like to stay here.
So that's a really good example of where I think that colleagues who are currently working in the primary school sector, in those schools, who could retrain to do other things. I think it's a really good example of what we believe, you know, could happen, and people can move from a sector where there are going to be, you know, fewer jobs because there are fewer children into a sector where there's very strong demand. Whether they want to spend the time training as an educational psychologist or a social worker, there are opportunities to do this. And so it's a very good example.
I think we need to move on to the next agenda item if we're happy. If asked any more questions, just to note the report. Are we happy to note the report, please? Thank you very much for the detail of report and your answering of the questions.
So could I also say thank you for all the hard work? I don't know about the rest of you, but I personally think you've worked extremely hard and, you know, I would like to say congratulations on all the effort and I think we appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's not just I work hard, but my colleagues do as well. I mean, I think we're building a really strong team and I feel really proud to work in the team that I do because there's a lot of people across the whole directorate working very hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, and yeah, I echo those thoughts. And we move on to item 8, which Mark is leading on.
Yeah.
Children in Care Report.
Yeah, thank you. Again, good evening again. Again, I'm going to make the assumption that you had the chance to read the report, so I'm going to go over some of the highlight areas. And again, as Ashley's done, I should pick out a few points, some of the positives and challenges, and talk about some of the future planning as well. So the report gives an overview of what permanency planning is, and when I'm talking about permanency planning, this is about finding stable homes for our cared for children at the right time. And what the current processes are for ensuring children transition from those right homes. It gives an overview of the number of children we have that we care for, where they live, and the financial costs and the challenges and some of the pressures. The report also gives an overview of the current and future planning arrangements, including plans for our sufficiency strategy to ensure we continue to have the right homes for our children and they continue to meet the needs, whilst also continue giving value for money. Some of the points I'd like to put out some of our strengths in this area. Although we do have clearly some challenges around children living off island, that's not where we want to be. I think it's fair to say, you know, the majority of the children do get to remain somewhere on the island, which is really, really important. It does ensure they have continuity of education and can have contact with either birth families and extended families really, really easily. And obviously they remain part of the local community, which is really important. But like I alluded to earlier, we'd like to have more on the island, and I will come on to that. I also think we're really good at exploring extended families. We have 62 children with connected carers, so they're foster carers that are either immediate or extended family, or they may even be actually known to other adults that are known to our children. Again, I think this is really, really important. Where it's not safe our children to remain with birth families, actually the next best thing is clearly to extend our searches and do our relative assessments on extended families and adults that are known to them. It's clearly got to be better for the child to be with someone familiar and actually they know them and have a good understanding of their needs as well. And again, I think it's a real strength and something that we do obviously assess for whenever we are considering any child may need to come into our care. I would also like to say we do have a really skilled and dedicated foster carers who are really committed to caring for our children. And only yesterday, I was lucky enough to go along to their Christmas party. Not for food. I did have a really nice chat with them actually, and I was just really, really struck of just how really dedicated they are, and I was lucky enough to meet some children as well yesterday that were going for adoption, and it was just really lovely to see that their skills, dedication, and some of the discussions I had, they were just really, really child focused and really want the best for the children that they care for. We also have a really skilled workforce, and I'm really proud that they do know the children really, really well, that they work alongside, that they are our social workers, and our social workers that also support our foster carers. And we do have many opportunities to seek their views in shaping their plans. So clearly when social workers visit regularly, we have cared for children reviews, which are overseen by independent reviewing officers. And we do have a number of events as well throughout the year. So we have our Star Awards, which is a celebration of our children, but we also use it as an opportunity to gather feedback and trying to help shape some of our services. We have other celebratory events throughout the years. Some of those are as simple as our social workers taking our children out over the summer holidays and Christmas holidays and things as well. And a great way of really getting alongside our children, understanding them. But we do take it back and we do really use it to shape their their plans about where their futures are and where they live. To pull out some challenges, yeah, we've alluded to some, to be honest with you. We do have a shortage of suitable homes that can meet the needs of our children, where it be therapeutic foster carers, general foster carers, and actually when we do need to look further afield, some of the specialist provisions for some of our children, again, that there is a real shortage. And at times it is a real challenge to find the right home. And unfortunately, at times we do have to look off island and further afield on the mainland. It's not something we want, and where we are having to consider that, it's always seen as a short-term measure, and we're also part of the permanency planning is to keep reviewing those children, so that when it's right to do so, that we can move them closer to the island. Our aim would always be to get them into some long-term fostering care, ideally on the island or back home, if and when it's ever safe to do so. So we never rule that out either. The costs of our homes is a real challenge, and you'll see from the report that year on year costs go up. Although we've had a small decrease in children we care for, actually because of the costs going up, there's no financial saving, and year on year it is costing us more. There are a number of reasons for that. Nationally, that there are shortage of homes. We're not alone as a local authority, and actually when we are going outside of the local authority and our own foster carers, there are market forces, and we are in competition with other local authorities that are also looking for homes for children, and they can charge quite a bit of money as well. And again, yeah, it's tricky, but again, another reason why we do want to increase our foster carers on the island, not just the financial costs, but actually it's better for our children. And I will touch on it as well. Again, Ashley's touched on it around education, but it also has a real impact on our children that we care for. The complexities of our children. I don't think I'm wrong in saying this. I've been touching with for a long time. They've changed for sure, and the complexities have become higher. And we're starting to see actually for younger age children as well, which is something that can't talk for other colleagues, but something I've not seen. And speaking to other colleagues, they would say the same as well. We have a number of real challenges with children under 10 years old that are, I mean, they're small numbers, but they're really challenging for us to try and find the right homes, even for small numbers of children. But their needs are really, really complex, and they've suffered quite a lot of trauma. And again, this is only anecdotal, that I don't have any evidence to this. I mean, we have spoke a lot about whether or not these are children coming out of post-COVID that may well have missed milestones by not being able to attend school, those social interactions, and also isolation of parents as well during that time. But it is a trend that we are starting to see, something we haven't seen over previous years. So what are we doing? Again, Ashley touched on, we have appointed, Julie, her name is, our sufficiency lead, and that review of our homes for children is underway. There's a number of areas that we're looking at. So the children on the edge of care, so that's families that are really struggling, and actually we are concerned, and we may well be considering caring for their children. And we've already moved or changed the criteria for our targeted family support team, so to go in there and actually work and support families much earlier, so as to prevent in the first place the children actually having to come into our care. The commissioning as well. There's a review undertaken of the commissioning of our homes, and we need to ensure that we are achieving the best outcomes for our children that can meet their needs, but also we need to be really, really clear that we're getting really good value for money as well, so that it will be about going back and challenging providers of the homes. We're also just started our fostering review. So this is a review of our foster carers. As I said, we really want to have a drive in getting foster carers on the island so that our children can remain on the island for full benefits that I've said. So we are looking at the recruitment strategy about how we recruit foster carers, what we can do differently, maybe do some targeted work alongside certain professions, how we recruit, how we use our partnership with Fostering South East as well, which is a I say conglomerates, I've worked alongside other local authorities as well about attracting foster carers and recruitment. We'll also need to look at allowances that we pay our foster carers as well. And we do need to make sure that they are competitive and that we do attract foster carers to come and work for local authorities. Again, we are kind of in competition with independent fostering agencies. Sometimes they pay more. To be fair, even speaking to the foster carers yesterday, it's not really about the more, it's about actually the support that they have. And it's really interesting yesterday, some of them are actually saying it was a moral and ethical decision they've made to come and work for local authority, as well as, you know, rather than work for agencies. But we are in competition and we do need to make it financially attractable for foster carers to work with us. And the last area that the lead is looking at is about how we achieve permanence for our children. Again, this is about stable homes, but the right homes at that time. But just because today a child may require a residential home, that's not to say that they're left there. We review that regularly with our reviews. And actually, when it's right to do so, we'll be looking at stepping down to foster carers as an example and closer to home. And actually, they're continually on that journey, and that journey of permanence doesn't just stop when we get a care order in place. We do regular review, and it might well be right that actually children remain in long-term foster care, but also we will consider, and we do reunify children back home as well. As children become older, their needs change, and so do families' needs change as well in time. So it's only right that we regularly review. And where right to do so, we will work and assess families for return of the children to their care. That care that support obviously doesn't stop there either. That you know, if it's appropriate and the courts agree, then we will continue supporting that family as well with our care. So hopefully that gives you a quick overview of some of the challenges and some of the positives. But I'm obviously clearly more than happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Mark. Questions? Mr. Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Now I found my bearings.
You're going to ask when I interim care orders.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was about the interim care orders. I was just wondering, do we know roughly what percentage of them end up after assessment escalating from that point?
Okay. That's a really tricky question. And you know, you gave me time to think about it. I had to really think about it. I'm going to be honest with you. I can't give you a percentage. What I can tell you is probably a high percentage of those that the children will come into our care. They've already got to the point where we are so concerned that we have entered the court proceedings. So we do have genuine concerns around safety, you know, of those children, whether it be through neglect and abuse. And what I would like to reassure you is that actually when we go through that process, that we do consider, as alluded to, you know, relatives, extended family, because actually if it's right that we assess them for the children to live with, we'd much rather do that because it's far in the best interest of the children. We have to, and we do as well, also don't have care orders on some children. We may well get to the end of our assessment and actually we're quite happy with some of the progress that the family have made. And actually we can assess that actually they don't require a care order. We can use another order, a supervision order, for instance. But actually we have some oversight and can put some additional support in. But not without giving you percentages. The majority of those I would expect to go on to come into it.
Follow-up question? No? Councillor Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. Once you've assessed and approved foster carers,
yeah,
and they've been in for some years, do you ask them if they want to be put forward to do more specialised fostering, such as with more difficult children, and do they require special training for that?
Yeah,
Thank you.
We do. It's a good question. We have 2 levels of foster carers. So I refer to them as general foster carers. I don't really like that. But we have impact carers. So our impact carers are more specialist trained, particularly in trauma and understanding the complexities of our more complex children. So yes, there are opportunities as our foster carers become more experienced, become impact carers. They are trained in a trauma-informed approach. And because they are dealing with the more complex children that require more time and skills, we do pay an enhanced fostering allowance. But there are those opportunities.
Do you have a follow-up question? Please do.
Thank you. Are you getting enough people coming forward wishing to be foster parents?
The answer is no.
No.
We're not.
No.
We're not. That's why we really do need to relook
Yes.
at our marketing strategy, and we want to attract more. It's difficult for some of the reasons I said. You know, just living on the island can make it really difficult. But also the way we go about marketing ourselves, you know, the rewards for fostering, there are different ways that we can do it. And that, like I said, that may well be that we take a far more targeted approach. We still do our events, Scarlet festivals and all those events. You will see us there busy recruiting. We get some recruitments from people just ringing up, word of mouth. But even when we get the inquiries, there's sort of really rigorous, understandably, assessment process. And actually some of those, you know, aren't suitable at the end of the day, but we will support where we can. But it is a very rigorous assessment. But yes, we would like to attract more. We don't have enough.
Taleva.
Sorry, just first one, just to piggyback on what Councillor Downer just asked. Roughly, how many more foster carers would we need on the Isle of Wight, you think, for us to feel comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, that is part of the sufficiency work that's going on. So if you'd asked that question in 3 months' time, I think I'll give you a far more accurate an answer.
Also,
I mean, we have
are we
a number.
talking hundreds? Are we talking tens? Or
No, we're
hundreds?
talking tens. We're not talking hundreds and hundreds. No, we are talking tens. I mean, as a rough estimate, you know, the number of children on the mainland, for instance, that would give you a good idea of the number we'd need to return them back to the island. I can't remember. I think it was so. We are on off island, but actually some of them, it's right they're off island because actually their needs are better met. We need to increase it, but by the tens. Really. Yeah.
I have to do this. I have to do this. Would you like a written response to that? An accurate written response to that?
It's okay, because
I wondered if you were offering there.
the next question I had was, and I think you might have alluded to it there, was when do we expect the review to wrap up? Is it 3 months?
It should be done by March. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that something that would come back to the committee? Can we be able to see that?
But we can request it. If you want to make a proposal, we request that. I'm happy to second that and we'll request it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Yes. Sylvia.
But we could include it in the regular update on things, because corporate parenting is one of the key 3 priorities we have in children's social care. So that's such a key event that we can include it in that regular item, if that's okay with you.
Do you have any further questions?
I've got one more, Chair, but feel free to.
My pen's wearing out with your name on my bit of paper.
This might be quite a difficult one, so apologies. But I was just reading the opening paragraph talking about the abuse and neglect that often leads to these cases. Are there trends in what leads to that, and are we able to sort of assess that and use it to to inform preventative action elsewhere? Is that a piece of work that goes on to tie that in?
Yeah, the trends go up and down. If I'm honest with you, the majority is for neglect, but actually it's unfair just to say neglect as such. There'll be other factors. We see an increase in domestic abuse, substance misuse, alcohol misuse, poor parental mental health. That has increased certainly over the years. And again, that does inform some of our early help support. So if I go back to our targeted family support, we have mental health workers that work alongside families, and we also have some specialist workers that work with parents with substance misuse as well. The trends kind of go up and down. Neglect is the main. Neglect kind of encapsulates quite a lot. Physical, sexual abuse, they're more rare, but actually physical abuse will come alongside domestic abuse, and yeah, it's quite intertwined. But parental mental health it is a worry, as is but again, they're quite often linked with domestic abuse and substance misuses as well.
So, Mark, thank you for the report. The recommendation is that we note the report. Show of hands, are we all happy to note the detailed report with the caveat that Councillor Lee was put in place that we have a report that forms part of a report, comes back to us in March when the review has been completed. Thank you. We'll move on. Scott, can you turn your camera on if you're online still?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can I first say, Scott, thank you for your patience. I know you've been online for quite a while. I hope you found part of the meeting interesting. Thank you for your patience getting to this stage. But we've got your report. I'll let you talk through our report and then we'll ask Councillor Leaver to ask some questions.
Okay, thank you. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Scott McKechnie. I am currently independent chair and scrutineer for the Isle of Wight Safeguarding Children's Partnership. But, I'll come to it later on, but I'll be stepping down as the chair and handing that over to the Director of Children's Services because of changes that were implemented last year and working together to safeguard children in December of last year. So just a reminder that this is one of our statutory duties to produce a yearly report, which is linked to working together safeguarding children, and a reminder also that in relation to the work of the Safeguarding Children's Partnership, the three statutory partners are local authority through Children's Social Care, but also police and health. So I'll pick out a few highlights because hopefully the chance to read the report and there's a lot in it. Probably for you as a scrutiny committee, and obviously I'm now a scrutineer, so I can act on your behalf as well. But what I would say is that the Safeguarding Children's Partnerships is a mature partnership. It's well attended and supported by executive leaders, and also by those leaders that invest their time and activity of the subgroups to drive forward the work of the partnership. That I have to say, it comes at times has been challenging. I think it's been alluded to already tonight, just about that increased demand and also the complexity and level of needs of children and families. Plus, you interject the cost of living, public finances, and workforce recruitment and attention. But that hasn't, the determination of those leaders to improve outcomes for children and families has been unwavering, despite many of those challenges. So that's why it was really good, and I know Ashley's referred to the sort of focus visit they've had, but for the Island Children's Services to achieve good from Ofsted last year, and then obviously they've been in more recently, as alluded to earlier in the report, earlier in the meeting. But what that does for me is it just reaffirms that the new directorate knows exactly where they need to improve. And we as a partnership have been getting quarterly reports both to our executive meeting but also to the main partnership board around the progress of the areas that were identified during the initial Ofsted inspection. So we as a partnership as well, just for you as a committee to be aware of, we are involved in the engagement around the creation of the new directorate, and also involved in the employment of what I would say have been good strategic leaders that have come in, who have been very engaged and collaborative from the outset with other partners and the partnership, obviously focused on safeguarding children. This continues at the moment, and I think it was alluded to earlier that obviously is that some of the commission services with Hampshire come to an end. The partnership involvement in particularly the MASH has been very significant, and we're still seeing good progress as that moves towards the implementation phase next year. The partnership arrangements are strong. We've got a well-established and well-attended education subgroup, which is chaired by the Service Director for Education, Inclusion and Access. It's representatives from early years, primary, secondary and special schools, independent schools, colleges. And of course, we have a very strong and thriving designated safeguarding lead network who are engaged with our education subgroup and the partnership in general. This ensures that education is involved at operational level, but also strategic level, and looking to how we can further strengthen that. We are also engaging with Department for Education's national education facilitator to make sure that we have got good governance arrangements in place, but also good scrutiny and progress around some of the work areas that we've got in place. There are links to the voluntary community and social enterprise network in the island, which is a very strong network. Is good. One of our members, who's Bernardo's area director, is also a member of that community. So our link across is very good. And one example of that is that as a partnership, we recently created a safeguarding checklist for organisations, particularly those in the voluntary community and social enterprise networks, but also we're developing that into now to sporting clubs. And we were involved in Bernardo's as a conduit, working with us to develop that and build it jointly. And Voice of the Child is one area you'll see pages 38 onwards. We have a strength of a lot of the organisations that are engaging with children and families and seeking feedback. As a partnership, we always look to do that wherever we can. But as an executive group at the moment, we're really looking closely at that to see how we can strengthen that, particularly in the area of safeguarding. It's often a traumatic time for children and families, but it's trying to find the opportunities that we can use to engage some of those children and families to seek their feedback, particularly in relation to the safeguarding journey that they've been on and how we can improve that. So that is a work, it's a priority for us now. There are lots of feedback that we get, as you can see in the report, but also more recently, not in the report, but it was ongoing, or the survey was ongoing during the time of the yearly report. Was that you may have heard of the Be Well survey, which we've had presented to our partnership, but we've also become a coalition partner of the Be Well survey, which is conducted with children across Hampshire, White, Portsmouth and Southampton. Another example of engaging children is our board manager co-produced with children a piece of work which was titled "What Being Late Means to Me." And it was interesting, the comments earlier about school readiness. That is one of the areas that seems been disruptive to children in education. So we co-produced that with children, and that's now built into as part of our neglect toolkit to be used by professionals. Some of the highlights in the report, obviously you see data on pages 6 to 7, and that continued increase. Particularly you look at the last 2 years, you see the increase in demand coming in to what we call the front door, which is ultimately the multi-agency safeguarding hub. The education data shows, the increased number of exclusions and suspensions. So hence why that's been a focus area for the partnership last year during this yearly report, but has continued to be. Probably a couple of areas to highlight. One is the implementation of the child sexual abuse strategy, and you'll see mention of that in the report as one of our priorities. And we're currently engaging with the Centre for Expertise in Child Sexual Abuse, which is a national agency linked to the University of Bedford. And because a couple of the one key driver that's shown in national reports, but it's also locally, is that how do we spot the signs for children that they may be subject to abuse, and particularly sexual abuse. So looking for signs and indicators, and that's what our sessions, we've got 3 sessions, one completed already, and our 2 sessions coming up, delivered by the Centre for Expertise for professionals to help them look at spotting the signs rather than always waiting for a disclosure. And there's another area there that was identified in the audit about providing therapeutic support to children whilst they're still within the criminal justice process, and that the CPS guidance around that. So that's one of a couple of areas that we're really focused on in that regard. We had, back into education, we had a designated safeguarding lead conference, which we jointly hosted with Hampshire this year. You'll see that at page 28 and what was involved in that. much of the topics there are areas that are identified out some of our audit activity and recommendations, which are detailed in pages 17 to 21 of our report. And one of the key aspects that we have as a board, and one of our key statutory duties is to conduct reviews, which you'll see is kind of mentioned in page 22 of our report, around where children have come to harm and often sadly result in more serious consequences for children. And the big part of what we do is to look at those cases, and we haven't had any formal child safeguarding practice reviews commissioned during this yearly report period, and some referrals that didn't meet the criteria. A couple of areas that we do, part of what we do is support the audit under, well, schools will do an audit under section 157, 175 of the Education Act, and then section 11 of the Children's Act for other organisations working with children, where they do a self-audit. And what you'll note from the report is a really good response. 100% of schools completed that. We then aggregate all that information, and then we choose 5 schools to go and do some quality assurance about that. That's an ongoing process that's conducted every year, and it provides us with assurance around the school's own auditing of their own safeguarding procedures and policies. One thing to highlight, and that's part of the section 11 audit, was a staff survey that's conducted, and it was really showed a real strength that 99% of those who completed the survey know how to speak to someone when they've got a safeguarding concern, and similarly high numbers in relation to how to report a safeguarding concern and knowledge of whistleblowing policies, which provided us the partnership and should use as a committee some assurance around that. Probably that is the main things that I would probably like to highlight in the report, and welcome any questions. I appreciate there's a lot in the report, but wherever possible we try to show the work that we do, but also the impact it's making on children and families from a multi-agency perspective.
Scott, thank you very much for your report and your explanation of the report. This is your first 4 years report, I believe, and it says in the report, it's the first time you've done. It's your first.
Yeah. So I should have said that at the start. Yeah, it's my first full year as chair and scrutineer, and the scrutineer aspect is something that was new, which came in with my role. So, and that's something that I'll take very seriously and engage with our partners around, but also ask questions. Often questions that I feel we'll be asking on behalf of our communities, our children, our families, as well as being a good critical friend and support to our partners, but also to ask the questions when they probably need to be asked, a bit like what you're doing tonight.
Thank you. Questions, members? Do you have any questions? Microphone. Scott, can you hear a word of that?
Sorry. I just feel very sad, and I think to myself, there but for the grace of God go I, who knows? And sometimes when you read bits of it, I could actually cry that people could do and behave the way they do. But then I can be a rather emotional person. But thank you for the report, and it is comprehensive. And hopefully we help as many people, or you help as many people as you possibly can.
Thank you, Vanessa. Can't see any more hands up. So Scott, so Mr. Whitaker, sorry.
Can I just, on behalf of all colleagues on the Isle of Wight, thank Scott for the leadership that he's provided in this role over recent years. As he said, I think we've got a well-functioning partnership, and a lot of that is a result of the leadership that Scott brings to it and the constructive challenge that he brings to partners to improve practice and improve outcomes and experiences for children and families. He did mention at the beginning that because of the change in legislation around working together, He is about to cease being the chair of the Safeguarding Children's Partnership, and I'll be becoming the chair in the new year. And I'm absolutely delighted that he's going to be staying on as the independent scrutineer, because he's a great member of the Isle of Wight team. And I'm really looking forward to working with him on an ongoing basis in his new focus on being the independent scrutineer. So thanks a lot, Scott, on behalf of everyone on the island.
Yes, thank you very much, Scott, and another job Mr. Whittaker to take on. One of many. Scott, thank you very much for your time this evening as well, and thanks for waiting patiently
No
for
problem.
your slot on the agenda, and best wishes for the future.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, I'll probably leave now. Thank you.
We now move on to item 10. Councillor Andre has waited incredibly patiently for 2¼ hours. So as the chair of SACRE, I invite you to present your report, to talk through key parts of your report.
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind that the committee seems to be diminishing by the minute, I propose to do a brief introduction, and then if you're in agreement, Chair, I was going to focus on the questions of the focus for scrutiny. I'm assuming that members of the committee have read the report. There's a lot of detail in there. If you're happy with that approach.
Absolutely, yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, the teaching of religious education in schools is something of an anomaly, because religious education is not part of the national curriculum, but it is a responsibility. And how the local education authority deliver that responsibility is through having a standing advisory council for religious education. So I have been a member for the last 7 years, over 7 years now, since I was first elected. I've been chair for the last 2 years. So this is my second annual report, and I'll go now on to the focus for scrutiny. So how does SACRE monitor the quality of religious education and collective worship in schools? Well, it's done in a variety of ways. So in terms of the monitoring, there are physical visits that take place within the schools. I myself have accompanied our advisor. We use the Hampshire Improvement and Advisory Service. So, and those visits are open to any SACRE member to accompany. I think it's important to point out, it's very much in the report, that the SACRE is made up of 4 committees, but one of those committees is actually head teachers, and we always strive to have a teacher that is a special educational needs and disabilities lead within one of the schools, and we have actually got that position filled at the moment. The other way that we monitor is by looking at the data that comes from the schools, and especially the GCSE results. And you'll see from the report that we have deducted both positives and negatives from the examination results that have come through. In terms of the numbers of young people on the Isle of Wight who are entering the full course of religious studies GCSE, which there is the spiritual, moral, social and cultural development aspect of the provision in schools that is delivered through religious studies. So we do have a concern about the low uptake of numbers. And we've this year committed to raising the profile of religious studies. So to go back, how have we responded to these issues or challenges? Well, we held a very successful Youth Voice event that I myself and another member of the SACRE attended. And it was delivered by our secondary advisor lead on the island. I think there were about 4 of the secondary schools that took part. And it was done in such a way that it would engage the young people. So it was very much interactive, thought-provoking, getting them to really think. And it was on a broader level. It's important to say that in terms of the SACRE, it's not just about one religion. It's about world beliefs. It's about developing children as individuals. So we also ran training sessions for governors, because we know, and I'm sure Chair will agree with this, that governors are very much part of the monitoring of the delivery of education within schools. So we focus both on the young people themselves and the governors. So in terms of timelines, we've already actually delivered that. It's an ongoing process. We also have, as a SACRE, we do an annual self-assessment where, and it's a set process where we actually measure how effective we are as a SACRE at monitoring. The other thing I'd like to just highlight is that it's not just about the monitoring. There is a wide range of support that is also delivered. So our local authority elect to use the Living Difference 4 to deliver the religious education. And there's a whole raft. I mean, I won't go into it all here, but there is a whole raft of information, guidance, support. There is a Hampshire Improvement and Advisory Service Moodle that the teachers have access to. We have advice through a primary network. We also have a secondary network. So there's lots of training, continual professional development that is offered through our advisor to SACRE. And I will now come to the final question, which I have to admit did actually bring a slight smile to my face. Does SACRE have sufficient funding to perform its duties effectively? I am reliably informed that SACRE has had pretty much the same budget of 4,000 per year over the last 18 years. It hasn't increased. We are very careful how we spend that limited budget to have the maximum impact. So when our advisor comes over, for example, she comes over from the mainland, we make sure that we actually maximize her time on the island. So quite often she will carry out a monitoring visit on the same day as a SACRE meeting to maximize that. We were able to put the youth voice on. That obviously, that whole event, that wasn't without a cost. If we had a larger budget, we could actually do more. Well, it stands to reason. We are fulfilling our statutory duties, but we do feel that we are limited by that budget as to the maximum impact that we can have. So I hope I've answered those questions, but I commend the report to you. As I say, it's very detailed. There's a lot of work that has gone in. this year. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Firstly, thank you for your detailed report. Questions from members? You can go first, Councillor Down. Of course you can. Councillor Leeds gone.
A difficult one, because how many, you say SACRE, how many different sorts of religions and beliefs does SACRE cater for? And also, where the United Kingdom and Britain is becoming a secular society, how keen are the pupils to engage?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Downer, which I can actually say every year we send a representative to the National Association of Standing Advisory Councils for Religious Education. Sorry, Ashley, I've been trying not to use acronyms, bit of a mouthful. And I've attended for several years out of the last 7 years. And would you believe it, we are one of the most diverse standing advisory councils for religious education in the country. We sometimes, it's fair to say, we do struggle as far as our council is concerned, the committee is concerned, to fulfill the requirements of each committee, but we do have succession planning. So we are always looking to recruit more members. I can tell you, I think currently we have Catholic, Jewish, Church of England, Quaker, Buddhist, and in addition to the local authority members and the school members. In terms of how we get the young people to engage, it's all contained within the curriculum that is used, Living Difference. We're currently on the 4th iteration, and every 4 years we review it. So we will be, I think it's either next year or the year after, we will be in fact, next year we will be starting the process for Living Difference 5. So the actual resources that are provided to deliver the religious education curriculum are reviewed on a 4-yearly basis. So the way that the material is provided, we work very closely with the head teachers and the teachers that are actually delivering it. And part of the monitoring visits is we look at the circle of enquiry, which is the way that it's delivered for each. So, for example, for Christianity or for the Jewish faith or for world beliefs, there is a framework that is the same in the way that each religion or world belief is delivered. And it's down to the school, the resources are there, but it's down to the school to actually decide which parts of that curriculum that they're going to choose. But it's also contained within Living Difference. It's year relevant. So it's actually, the resources are given in such a way that they are relevant for the pedagogy of that year that is being delivered by the teachers. I hope that answers your question.
I do apologise because they've got your face up here. What I spoke about, all the different
Page
religions.
182.
Yeah,
I
my
just-
apologies.
It was one observation, one comment, really, one question, really. I don't think religious education is pushed in schools anymore. It's a shame. I went to schools where you had assemblies in the morning. There was a religious content to it, and I think that has gone out of schools. Not many vicars. When I first started out as a school governor, God knows how many years ago, 30 years ago, whatever, the local vicar was always on the governing body of the school. I think that doesn't happen anymore. Not in every instance it doesn't. You know, I've approached vicars to be governors, and it was They don't see it as part of the link with the schools. It isn't there with the church like it should be. That's a two-way thing. But I should know this one. The £4,000 funding comes from the council's education budget or the council's general budget?
I'd have to check that one for you, but I think it's, yeah, I think it is the education budget because it's delivered as part of the curriculum. So it must be from the education budget.
Therefore,
But if I could just pick you up, Chair, in the case of church schools, and I know because I've been a governor of a church school, but had to stand down as a cabinet member, they are required to have foundation governors. And I also know that recently, within the school that I think you are involved in, you have recently been offered from one of the priest in charge to actually come in and take a collective worship.
we have, and I hope I'm going to talk to him. I'm trying to talk him to being the governor as well because we need governors. But yes, it's not as prominent as well. So if
But it is, sorry, Chair, but it is fair to say that there are less priests in charge. You don't tend to get incumbents now in churches. I know that as a practicing Christian myself.
I think you're correct. So if the £4,000 funding, if you could do more for RE in schools with more funding, has that request actually been made formally, to where the budget sits at another £1,000, what you could do with it? It sounds like.
I think that's a conversation, Chair, that I need to have with the advisor because I am mindful of the pressures on our budget. So let's just say that, yes, as I've said, we could always do with greater funding, but what we actually do with the funding that is made available to us, I believe has the maximum impact.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, thank you. In the absence of any more questions, we are going to note your report. Thank you for it. We're happy to note Councillor Andre's report as Chair of SACRE. Thank you for the work you do on SACRE. And it has been 7 years you've been on that now, and I know it's something you enjoy doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move on to a couple of quick things to go through. The work plan. Work plan obviously quite interesting. Obviously, work plan sets out the agenda for our meeting on the 27th of February, which will be the last meeting of ever of the children, well, for 5 years at least. Last meeting for 5 years at least of the Children's Service Scrutiny meeting, because we will change to a cabinet. And I know one of the messages to all chairs of scrutiny is we try and get as many things tied up so there's not many loose ends carried forward. And we're fortunate, most of ours is about reports and challenge on reports. We've asked for more details, which will come back, before this committee is dissolved. So the reports we hope to get for the February one will be rounding off things we shouldn't have much left over for the new structure, I think. But some committees may, I don't think we will. Going forward. So we've got an informal briefing on the 21st of January. That's still going ahead. Informal briefing on homes for children and achieving permanence rather, a long meeting. And then on the 27th of February, we got the performance and transition, safety valve, which was mentioned earlier by member of the public, school attainment, and the childcare sufficiency assessment. So that's all coming back in February. That won't quite fit in with Councillor Lever's request for the data, or will it? Will we have some idea? I know you questioned about the sufficiency and the data, and
I think we might not have a definite, we'll have a pretty good idea, I think.
yeah, I think a rough update at that stage. A bit of an unfair question, I think, at that point, but a more accurate assessment at that stage would be useful. So that's our work plan. Unless there's any questions. Okay, we're just finished with, are there any members' questions? Yeah, he was on fire tonight, wasn't he? But always looked his way first time I looked. So can I thank members coming this evening, officers, well, Ashley, and certainly doing most of the work, and Mark for your report as well. Yeah, and I echo what was said about your team earlier on from Councillor Churchman. It was, please pass that message on for the whole committee to your team, what they're doing. And I hate to say this, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all of you. We'll close the meeting.